Hey, Rambo World Entertainment, and we're going to have a little conversation about the Continental, the first episode, which is now available to watch on Amazon Prime here this side of the world. It seems to be on Peacock in the States. So, this show focuses on young Winston, who is the Ian McShane character in the John Wick movies. I'm not going to go into much detail on the episode. I'm not going to spoil it or anything like that, so it'll be spoiler free. We'll just kind of go over general thoughts of the first episode for this. I'm not sure how many episodes are actually in the season, but it's based in the world of John Wick, and it's set in the 70s. So the synopsis for it says, set in the 70s, New York City, the Continental explores the origin of the iconic Hotel for Assassins, centerpiece of the John Wick universe, seen through the eyes and action of a young Winston Scott. Now, the cast is interesting. The standout person in the cast, and of course people are already giving out and they want to fire him, he shouldn't be in it, blah blah blah, is of course Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is the best thing so far in this show. He plays a guy called Cormac O'Connor, who is basically the head of the Continental. And Winston's brother Frankie stole from him. So he wants people to find Frankie. And he takes Winston from London, who he wants then to find Frankie. But the weird thing about the character of Winston in this is the guy they have playing them, a guy named Colin Woodell. He seems to be trying to do the Ian McShane voice, and it doesn't particularly work very well. He's not terrible in the role, but it takes you out of it a little bit, because you can't help but kind of go, hey, he's just trying to do a Ian McShane voice. The young version of, how do you pronounce his name? Sharon? The character who Lance Riddick played, the younger version of him. Not that there's very much of him in the first episode, but he doesn't, at least he doesn't yet kind of have that gravitas that exude from Lance Riddick, which makes sense because he's young in this and he's only kind of starting. Does the show work? Does it work? Does it fit in with the John Wick franchise? Yes and no. One of the problems I have with it is the first action scene we get with the character Frankie. It's literally like they just went, we'll just take a John Wick action scene with Keanu Reeves and we'll just use this character instead and just have it be very on the nose of that style of action. And you're looking at it and you can't help but go, his fighting style is almost identical to John Wick. And it makes no sense. Like, this character has nothing to do with John Wick, the character of Frankie. But then there's a lot of little nods and Easter eggs to the John Wick franchise. The car that Winston is given to move around in New York is the Mustang. It's the John Wick Mustang. Then I'm pretty sure the little ornament of the monkey giving the middle finger, well, that was in John Wick, wasn't it? Because as soon as I saw that thing is in this, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, isn't that from John Wick as well? And so you get those kind of comparisons, and the car obviously is the main one. The show starts to kind of, I should say the episode, the first episode, starts to drag and get a little dull when we're introduced to the cops, the characters of the cops, who the main cop we're sticking with is seems to be her name is KD, and not Katie, KD, and she's trying to get into the Continental. She seems to want to know what's going on in there, but it's just the story. Once you're introduced to her and her partner and stuff, Matthew and whatnot, it drags a little bit. Once we reach that point, like, you get all this kind of action and Mel Gibson being this. He's a villain, by the way. Just kind of the craziness around it, and then it kind of just slams into a wall once you get with the cop. Every time it goes to the cop, it seems to just slow down. But then the action, again, it starts off with a very John Wick style action set piece. But then the next time we see these characters fight, it's very un John Wick style. Like, they're getting the shit kicked out of them. You're like, you were literally taking on the hotel on your own at the start. Now you can't even take on two dudes with your brother. And the character of Yen, who was Frankie's wife, is an interesting character. You're not sure how to take her at the start, but then when she gets into a fight, they do that thing which works for me when you have women fighting gigantic fucking dudes. She uses not just her surroundings, but she uses an iron and even a garbage disposal. You'll have to see the episode to see. But even with all that, she's getting the shit kicked out of her. So they're not afraid to go there. We're introduced to a couple of more characters who, they seem to be gun runners, but their story, there's really nothing flushed out with their story yet. It's just they're a link for Winston to get to Frankie. But they have one more kind of big action set piece, and it doesn't work. It's a car chase shootout, and the reason it doesn't work is because not just is it very quick, but the screen keeps blacking out and coming back to a completely different scenario happening. So they're getting chased, all of a sudden the screen goes black, it goes back, they're firing, it goes black, it comes back, they're like smashing into things. It takes you out of it completely when that happens. So that scene did not work. The time frame for this was confusing to start with. Now, reading the synopsis, I can see it says it's set in the 70s. The reason it gets a bit confusing is it opens with a very quick shot of very young Frankie and Winston. Winston must be about, I don't know, 10 or 11. And it's set in 1955. It doesn't tell you what date we go to after that. It just says some years later. But it's when you see the fashion, you kind of go, is this the 60s or the 70s? But then there's a bit of music and you're like, didn't that song come out in the 80s? So it was kind of confusing. The look of the city and stuff is very interesting. It's meant to be New York. You do see the Twin Towers and stuff. Which also is why it's confusing as to when exactly the time frame is, because the Twin Towers were only completed fully in like 76, somewhere around that, I think. And they're fully completed in the show. But when you're down in the ground levels and stuff of the city, it almost looks like they went for the Tim Burton Gotham look. I'm not messing. There's steam everywhere, graffiti. It's always darkish. It's weird. So far, it's definitely got potential. As I said, Mel Gibson so far is the best thing in it. It's a long episode as well. It's like over an hour long. Downsides, as I said, is that car chase action scene and the scenes with the cops. Every time it goes to that, it's just, you're like, ugh. You actually don't have interest in those characters. But if you're into John Wick, it's definitely worth a look. It's got the John Wick violence It's got a lot more swearing than is in the John Wick movies, and it has something that hasn't been in the John Wick movies, was a sex scene. So there's a bit of nudiness, um, and near the end you get introduced to two characters who Mel Gibson hires from the hotel that you just look at and go, oh, you just went for the straight up weird end of things with the John Wick assassins. Yeah, I'm not going to spoil it, just you'll have to have a look. The only thing watching it is it makes you a little concerned about the Ballerina spin-off, the movie. I'm pretty sure Ballerina is the movie. Because if they were relying on action scenes to be exactly like the John Wick ones, but then other scenes not working, and then the story with the cops and stuff just not work. I know it's probably different people working on that, but it makes you question, can this stuff work without the actual character of John Wick? We're only one episode in, so I'm not going to judge the entire show off that yet. Did I enjoy it? Yeah, it was alright. As I said, there was a few drawbacks for me, but other than that, it was enjoyable. It's definitely interesting. You know, you're kind of seeing where the rules were starting to be laid in with the Continental and stuff like that. So we'll see where it goes. But if you're going to check it out, check it out. I'm not going to tell you not to. If you have, let us know in the comments what you think of it. Were you for it? Did you not like it? Did you find the same issues that I did? Let us know. With that, I'll leave it there for this one. So cheers. Catch you in the next one.